Chautauqua County Sheriff says Governor Cuomo is bullying his county. It's in response to the executive order demanding law enforcement agencies reform or else lose state funding. In a letter to the media, Sheriff James Quattrone says he believes this measure could have gone through the state legislature. He claims Governor Cuomo never reached out to law enforcement about his action, and the governor is wrong to claim that there is systemic racism in policing. Sheriff Quattrone says his office will comply with the governor's order so that the county's finances are not put in jeopardy.
Instead of him being here this evening, Jim, come up and share with us.
Thank you. So, thank you for putting that video up. At least it had my wife and my daughter in there, so we had some good lookers in there. So, I appreciate that. So, a disclaimer, the letter, I had a lot of help with the letter. Okay, I mean, we had people proofing it and reading it and going over it several times. So, and we discussed it several times amongst all the sheriffs in the state. And so it wasn't just, putting it out there and saying, this is what I believe, but this is what the sheriffs in New York State believe. And pretty much every police chief that I've spoken to also agreed with what I had to say in that letter. And it's not the points that the governor's saying we have to address. It's how he has done it and mandated we do it without even realizing, this is where the problem is, without him, I'm just going to set this down here, without him discussing it with law enforcement, we are already doing the majority of those things. The one thing on the list of 12 that I could really find that we may not be doing is restorative justice. And really, that's something very difficult for law enforcement to do because that's something that the courts should be mandating and doing. But he's putting that under the premise that law enforcement should be doing it. I am happy to say in Chautauqua County, we've been talking about restorative justice for about the last year and a half because we have a Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, and that initially started to reduce the population in the jail. But because of bail reform and many other things, COVID, the jail population is already down. We're down to about 120, today 127. We're potentially could have 303 in the jail. So instead of disbanding the coordinating council, Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, we decided to focus on restorative justice issues. So again, these things are in place. And so as I was sharing with James from Congressman Reed's office, is I don't know what it's like to be a cop in a big city. I don't want to know what it's like to be a cop in a big city. I mean, I've never policed there. I mean, I've been to New York City twice in my life, and that was just for a quick visit. And and I'll stay in Chautauqua County. But I did take issue with the governor again, not only mandating these things, and it's misspoken even on the news where they say it'll be taking money away from the sheriff's department. It'll be taking money away from the county. Okay? Because I had evaluated, I'm thinking, well, take the money away from the sheriff's department. We don't get a lot from the state, per se, from the sheriff's office that we could do. But it would be from any funding from the state to the county. So we think that's important to recognize. And, we are constantly evaluating our practices, our policies, our procedures. I tell people I evaluate policies daily. Now, that doesn't mean I go through all the policies daily, but when we're reading police reports, issues are going on, I'm looking at our policies and our procedures to say, are the guys following them? Are they doing what they're supposed to do? And are the policies appropriate for the time? Things change, and we recognize that. And so we're continually doing that. Yearly, we have to go through I have to read through our policies and procedures, sign off on them. So we're doing it, already doing it yearly. And the policies and procedures are governed by the governor's Department of Criminal Justice Services. So it's that with his edict that he put out, Executive Order 203, he also said in the following week the Department of Criminal Justice Services will give us some guidance on how to go about this. And I can't remember the exact date. It was around the end of June. And next week hasn't come yet because we have got nothing from the Department of Criminal Justice Services giving us guidance on how to do this plan or reinventing, which I don't know that we need to reinvent. I'm fine with looking at those. I'm fine with going through the process. Like I said, we already do that. And the other thing is building the community relations. Something, I worry because Fiedler will probably harass me, but I've encouraged our guys to stop at the coffee shops, stop at the local restaurants, stop at the fire halls, in the communities, because that's where we learn what's going on in our community. It's when we, and I think it's more dynamic. We can hear what's going on. People are free to speak to us. We're still working at that. But to put a time frame on building relationships with our community is wrong, because that should be an ongoing. I just celebrated my 28th wedding anniversary, and that relationship is still growing and still getting better, and there's still room to get even further better. I know we're taped, so hopefully my wife heard that. But it is any relationship. It shouldn't be just static. It's going to be a constant growing and improving, and that's, again, just like law enforcement. We need to continue to do that. So, we will continue to do that. We will continue to look for funding to do the training. So when they talk about defunding the police, but yet they want us to do more training, it's kind of, difficult to do. And unfortunately, in our sectors, one of the first parts of the budget that's cut is the training budget. They'll cut that, and so we have to find creative ways to do our training. Some of the things that, again, that's in the order we've been doing and continue to do, and but it's all about funding, and so we have to continue to find ways to be creative. Honestly, the one positive thing that has come from COVID is we've been forced to find ways to use technology to help us with meetings, and we can actually use that for some of our trainings. I've been able to go through some great trainings, through Zoom, and if you have somebody who knows what they're doing with Zoom, they can do that really well. So, we're going to be utilizing that, and we are doing that now to make sure people continue to be well trained. So I just, and I said I don't want to talk a lot, but I can talk more, but I'd also like to open it up to questions that I can try to answer my best. I have notes in case I don't, so I can go back and look at them. Yes?
Can you speak to the item that I heard recently that they're going to require police officers to purchase their own liability insurance?
Yeah, that is, I do not believe it hasn't been passed yet, but they are discussing I'm not sure if the Assembly or Senate or who, but they're discussing that we'll have to purchase, and actually they said the law enforcement will have to purchase the liability. However, what I've seen is the county would have to pay for that initial liability, and then each year they will evaluate it, and if there's like an incident, then the officers have to pay the extended premium. So what that does is, again, adds costs to the county. And honestly, if it's the officers that have to buy their liability insurance, purchase that, it's what, I had mentioned earlier, this is making, I think, our community unsafe. And the reason being is it's making it more and more difficult to get qualified law enforcement officers. We saw in different departments when some of these laws passed, people retired. So what we're seeing is experienced law enforcement officers that we really need around to help train the younger guys. We have a young police force, and I say not just the Sheriff's Department, but in Chautauqua County. And we need those senior officers around to help train people up. And they're retiring. And so it is a little scary. We have 20 people that are signed up for the academy this year. We had, I believe, 19 in last year's academy. Every one of them has been hired, is either in a full-time or part-time capacity. So, it's difficult to get qualified candidates. It's been very difficult to recruit people of color into law enforcement. One of our officers, black man, talked to him and asked him, why is it so difficult for us to get people of color in law enforcement? And something I had never thought of, I'm not a person of color, so it's different. But he says, peer pressure. And it really opened my eyes. And he says, in high school, when you start talking about wanting to go in law enforcement, his friends were getting on his case about it and harassing him. So, and it was great insight on his part, but he says not only peer pressure, he says, with no disrespect to you, Sheriff, he says, it's not necessary you or other police officers coming in and talking to the students, but what we need is community members coming in and saying, this is an admirable career, consider going into that. But we need community support to do that. And, it hurts me when I hear officers say, they would never do this again. They're going to get out of this line of work. I have a daughter who's just graduated from college, and she's talking about going to law enforcement, and I'm 100% behind her going into it. Now, some of my coworkers say, are you crazy? But I think it's been a great career, a great profession, and I wouldn't, if I had to choose again, I wouldn't change my mind on that, even with what's going on today. Because we hear a lot of negativity towards law enforcement, but I firmly believe that we have a ton of support out there, and sometimes it's just, those who stay silent, but we've received cards and calls and contacts from people really truly supporting us. Interesting, at the beginning of COVID, we were the heroes in the essential workers, and hit Memorial Day after, because of an incident that should never have happened, we turned into the enemy. And that shouldn't be the case. I don't want to support in any way what happened with Mr. Floyd. That was wrong. But I do think that is much less than what the media portrays is happening out there in law enforcement.
Oh yeah, we know they lie. We know they lie.
I have a question.
Yes.
On this bail reform, how's that percentage-wise? What's the repeat offenders? I mean, I know around here probably isn't that much, but you get the bigger cities.
Yeah, I have not seen studies yet that have come out on that. And part of the reason with the bail reform taking place in January, and then come March, courts closing down, so it's been difficult to see what's happening as a result of bail reform, what's happening as a result of the courts being closed down. So I think was dangerous. They've tried to reform the reform. They've kind of gone a little bit. They're doing some improvements. They still have some more steps to go, and I hope they continue to look at that. And but again, it was an opportunity for the governor, maybe a knee-jerk reaction instead of truly evaluating what the consequences are of laws and orders. So,
also a comment I got on that too is, they never checked with the sheriffs of the counties or the police or any law enforcement on this.
no.
I don't know. Are they would be law enforcement people that are legislators and the governor and
My guess is the governor has talked to somebody, but he hasn't talked to the law enforcement organizations. So I'm sure somebody is counseling him. I can't say that for certain, but somebody's counseling him. He does have the Department of Criminal Justice Services at his beck and call that he can talk to them, and hopefully that they're sharing information with him. But they are sometimes at a loss there too. That's why I say we're still waiting, almost 2 months later for guidance from the Department of Criminal Justice Services. So, I'm not sure where he gets his counsel, and sometimes it might be based on New York City. But we all know New York City is a whole different area than Chautauqua County, and the policing is different. And but even looking there, truly, when you look at the number of incidences there with law enforcement and excessive force, it's not as many as people would like to make it seem. Yes.
What I'm interested in is to find out where Cuomo stands on this new, what he wants to do is he wants all the officers' names and address put into a database. I mean, well, basically it's going to create a doxing issue. Mm-hmm. So I know they talked about it. I don't know where that stands.
And I don't know where it stands either. I know, part of 50A, repeal of 50A, which helped to secure personnel records. And there was already an avenue for people to get those records. So if an officer was misconduct, they could still get those records. Now they've tried to repeal that, so it's easier for them to get all the records. And some of the problem is some of those records that they're allowed to get are even unfounded complaints.
Just directly founded false.
Right. Yeah, and they're still out there. So, and there's still some court litigation going on with that. So hopefully they'll get that straightened out. We just met today to discuss it with our county attorney, and quite honestly, the scary part of that is the amount of work and effort. If somebody were to look for that information, it's Onondaga. I think Onondaga, whatever county Syracuse is in, they've had to hire 2 people just to comply with their FOIL request. Now, obviously, it's a much larger agency. So, again, and then with redacting information, officers' personal information. One other thing to make it so officers don't want to stay in the field. So, yeah.
Organization.
Yeah.
You're going to regret inviting me, Mel. I think this is more a commentary than a question, but if you have thoughts on this. One is that insurance for officers, I know I've read about it in New York City, definitely. To some extent, I'm just making a commentary. Is that not welfare for lawyers? Think about what's driving that. Welfare for liability lawyers. Okay? The other thing is the attack on law enforcement. Okay, right now the left is attacking law enforcement because it's very, very convenient for their agenda. When they get control, will they want to get rid of the police department, or will they revert to Obama's 2009 proposal to form a national police force of power greater than the military? I remember that clearly. I have not forgotten that. And I don't think anybody should. The original Tea Party was all about hearing that. Just my commentary. What you're seeing out there, smokescreen for what the real agenda is, I think. And I took my tinfoil hat off and I wrapped it around my cell phone so I couldn't. But do you have any? You don't have to comment on.
Well, I would like to comment. So many of our laws, that. Do I believe there's a systemic issue in government? Yes. Do I believe there could be systemic racism? Yes. I do not necessarily say it's law enforcement, but when you think of how some of the laws are made and who's making those laws, in New York State, many of our lawmakers are lawyers. So there might be a correlation there. As far as getting rid of law enforcement, I often will talk about a study that was done in the mid 90s, early 90s. I'd like to really say how great the researcher was, but that was me, so I don't know. But I did my master's thesis on the public perception of police, and I truly don't think it has changed. And I'm not sure if this will go with all the Tea Party values, but what I found was that the people wanted their own police departments. So when we look at like police consolidation, most communities don't want that because they want that personal contact with law enforcement officers. That doesn't mean that way they can control them and get out of their tickets or whatever. That means they're going to hear them. And that's so to the governor's credit, when he says, hey, know what's going on in your community, I agree with that. And we have to continue to do that because, if you had the national police force, you're going to lose that contact. It's nice. Yeah, it's nice when I go into a restaurant and sit and have somebody come up and talk to me, and I enjoy it when somebody will come in and maybe harass me a little in a friendly way because it just kind of builds those relationships, and we have to continue to do that. We have to continue to build relationships with our community. I talk about some training I want to do with our officers. It's called Outward Mindset, and we are all in our own boxes, and when we're in a box, we look at each other as objects, okay? But when we get out of the box, objects to be used, for our purposes. When we step out of the box, we start to look at people as people. They have needs and wants and likes and dislikes. But when we both stay in the box, we have this collusion. And sometimes I don't want, we'll pick on Mel, I don't want Mel to get out of the box because then I might have to get out of my box. So, somebody's got to get out of the box and start looking at and working on solutions. That doesn't mean, and I like the first video shown is you don't have to change all your views, but have an understanding of going back and forth. And that's what I ask is for the public not to judge law enforcement on a few of the instances that happen around the country that hit the media, because I can't support what I've seen on some of those videos, but they're not showing, the things, the positive community building relationships that are out there, and we try to focus on that as much as we can. So, yes.
Two quick questions. First, I know you've spoken to some, but what are some reforms that you would actually like to see in police departments that you think would be beneficial for both the community and the police? And then my second one is you've kind of spoken about morale being low with some members of the police community. So what are some things that we can do in the elected official side and also just the general public that can help address that and help bring morale back up?
Okay. One of the things, we did submit several potential bills through the state legislature that they proposed. I don't know where they've landed. One of them is to make it more serious of resisting arrest than a misdemeanor. It's probably my favorite, but it's not necessarily something I would ever expect to get passed. But to recognize May 15th, which is Police Week, but May 15th, recognize law enforcement and all the officers who've lost their lives. Every year in Albany, there's a police memorial, and it's just blocks, if not even blocks away from the governor's office, and he has never attended. So part of that bill is to require him to attend and speak and read the names of the officers who have lost their life, but I'm not holding my head high waiting for that. The other issue in one of the laws, or one of the things that the governor of New York State has changed, is banning the chokehold. We haven't taught chokehold for many years. I came on the job in 1987, and we weren't teaching it then, so I don't know when they stopped teaching it. Now, again, I can't say statewide for sure, but what that law has done is if I'm on the ground and I'm fighting with somebody and I accidentally grab somebody by the neck or do something, in the fight, I'm going to be charged with a felony, okay, as a police officer. Now, they do say it has to cause serious physical injury or death, but how do you define serious physical injury? Within a week of that law passing, an officer in New York City was charged. Thankfully, the person didn't die. So I worry about that because, and it doesn't, in the federal government, they did pass a similar law. However, they said when you are defending yourself, it's a life or death situation, then you can do that. So what this law has done in New York State has made it safer for the police officers to use their sidearm than put somebody in a chokehold. And so, and again, not that I'm saying, hey, I'm advocating chokeholds, because I know in a stressful situation, that can be very dangerous.
Does that keep your officers from utilizing, I'm not sure if it's legal, say carotid restraints?
From what restraint?
From a carotid restraint.
Yes. Yes.
Does it make them afraid to use that restraint?
Yeah, we cannot use that. Even with the new law, we cannot use a carotid restraint. And so for those of you who don't know, the carotid cuts off the blood. It's kind of like a sleeper hold if you ever watch WWF wrestling. Whereas when you talk about like a naked choke, it cuts off the air supply. So this, the carotid makes somebody pass out versus causing the lack of breathing. But yeah, anything grabbing the neck and one of the dangers with the carotid hold is because you're struggling with somebody, so it can be also dangerous. But so as far as the morale, we just ask. I mean, I try to focus what our agency is letting them know. We get letters on a regular basis. I photocopy them, send it out to everybody. But standing up for the officers, when you see them, thanking them. It breaks my heart when I see little kids carrying signs that say, F the police. And it doesn't, it's not so much the F the police that bothers me, it's that you got a little kid, and what message does that send to them? We had, I got pictures this year during the COVID of kids coming up and bringing us lunch. Not to say you have to bring us lunch, but you know what? Just have that interaction with the kids. I have 3 of our deputies celebrated a birthday with an autistic child in Silver Creek. They had built a relationship with this kid on patrol, and they learned that it was his birthday. So the deputies, our lowest paid deputies, because they're the youngest guys, chipped in bought some Christmas or birthday gifts for this little boy. Those are the things that, again, focusing on the positive. And we don't see enough of that. Unfortunately, negative sells, whereas the positive, fun, exciting things is. So we try to share those, different things. One of our deputies has put together a video. I'm excited to get it out. It's kind of a long, but we're going to throw it on our Facebook. But it's interviewing a few of us, why we got into the job, how things have changed, just some different pictures of the kids around with us, community members with us. But those are the things. When you have something positive, let them know. I've had people that I've arrested reaching out to me, that's nice too, because they recognize, I messed up. I made a bad choice. The arrest, they didn't necessarily like the arrest, but again, it's building, relationship and treating people with respect. And again, something that we strive to do. Are we always perfect at it? No. I'd like to say we could always treat everybody with utmost respect, and that's the goal we always strive for. But I'm sure sometimes it just isn't happening in the situations.
Sheriff Quattrone?
Yes.
You have met with the Jamestown Justice Coalition.
Yes.
And have they been able to give you some concrete examples of actual interactions between any law enforcement in Chautauqua County that were prima facie racist? Have they given you a single example of that?
They have not given me a specific incident, I should say. There was one member did talk about an incident with her son. To her credit, she's not sure if it was racist or what caused it, but it made her feel uncomfortable, made her son feel uncomfortable. Hopefully that's been being addressed. We are continuing to meet with the Jamestown Justice Coalition. Actually, we had one meeting with 3 of their members, second meeting with 4, just a brief meeting. And we want to continue that dialogue, and not just with the Jamestown Justice Coalition, but with members of the community. So we're working on scheduling a date, again, to meet in the center of the county with different members of various communities. So the last time we met in Sinclairville, we had people from Dunkirk, from Silver Creek, North Harmony, Jamestown, trying to spread the community out. So the goal is to continue to have a couple more of those larger meetings, and then have meetings in the various communities where we're inviting, because we have a diverse county. How we police in Jamestown is going to be different than how we police in Clymer, and their needs are going to be different. And we have different groups. Through COVID, I've had an opportunity to work a lot with the Amish community, and I've learned a lot about their beliefs and values, and it's just been good conversations we've had. I am learning, in dealing when we're talking with minority groups, definitions matter, and when I say that is so we are always on the same page when we're talking about different topics, that we understand what both sides or both people are talking about. Because sometimes when I'm thinking the definition means this and they're thinking the definition means this, that creates some major conflict. And I've put myself in that position inadvertently, So I'm trying to get educated a little better, taking a class, learning about some of it, which is a tough class. It's tough to hear some of the things, but I think that's how we have to do this. And I think all members of the community, when we're going to be speaking about a topic, we should take the time to educate ourselves about that topic, and find out what everybody's thinking and learning from.
Another question, Sheriff. You mentioned you're losing the experienced people. In Jamestown, when Captain Isaacson resigns next week, they will have 7 officers out of 60 that have more than 10 years experience. What kind of ratio do you have? I'm not asking for the exact numbers, but what does that look like in the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Department?
I think we have more than that, but not. On our road patrol, that's probably about the same amount. Our investigators, but I can't tell you the exact number of that, Dave. I'll get back to you on that, though. When I look at our roster, I can figure that out. We do have a very young department, though. So.
Thank you.
No.
Jim, with regard to COVID, has the county noticed an increase in spousal abuse, increased child abuse, increased suicides that you know of?
So with the COVID, we initially saw an increase in domestic disputes, increase in mental health calls, increase in drug overdoses. That was happening in the first few months. Thankfully, some of those numbers, the domestic violence numbers have kind of leveled off. To be, we just pulled the numbers last week to look at them, and we're again about on par for the same number as the year before. But we have seen more mental health calls and more overdoses and more overdose deaths. Now, I can't fully correlate that to COVID, but I don't know that it's just coincidental. Yeah, it's we're seeing a lot of, and the drugs that they're bringing in are sometimes more potent, wherever they're getting them from. So, yes.
Thinking about watching all the violence that's going on in the big cities and so forth, and I know that we've had a couple of Black Lives Matter kind of rallies here, right? What's your forecast as to, is this thing going to come to our peaceful little area? What is your thoughts on that? Are we going to be seeing this kind of violence?
I don't believe we're going to see this kind of violence in the county. I think the groups, the Jamestown Justice Coalition, it was 3 young ladies, high school students, or maybe they might have just graduated from high school, that organized a rally up in Dunkirk, trying to make a difference. And one of the things, and I put this in the letter, is we need to be consistent in not just when a tragedy happens, but if we want to affect change, it's got to be something ongoing in reaching the right people. So when I say some of the changes that they're advocating for, really we need to be going to Albany and talking to them, or we need to be going to Washington and talking. It's in working with the schools. So when I say the schools, educating, but also encouraging more people to get into law enforcement. Working with the groups, the community groups, to help to try to get more people of color into law enforcement. And I spoke to a former Under Sheriff Holder a couple weeks ago, and he had made the efforts to go to several places in the several churches, several places in the city to try to recruit people of color to get into the academy, and it's just been difficult to do so. So
my concern is that the outside groups that are trucked in, right?
Yeah.
I'm not concerned about the people in this area.
Yeah.
The people that bring in.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I guess fortunately, not unfortunately, but when I say unfortunately, some of these other areas, you're right, it's people coming in from outside. We were worried about that, that the worry was not so much that the local groups would be asking for them to come in, but people who wanted to just cause problems would come in. And I don't think that our local groups will necessarily tolerate that. And I do believe if they saw that coming or were aware that it's happening, they would let us know. I said, hopefully any of our local, coalitions or groups, we want to work together to really try to, improve the community and overall. So I think that's what we're going to continue to strive for and continue to have hard conversations. I think we need to do that too. But like the video, start respecting people and respecting opinions. We can have difference of opinions and different views and, still say, hey, we're friends. So.
You have pretty good support from our county legislature as far as going on here, like the big cities. It's a fiasco.
I feel that we have a great county legislator, and you know what? I'm fortunate to be able to work with our county legislator, no matter what party. I was able, no secret, I'm Republican, but I was able to go sit and have lunch and, well, we didn't really eat lunch, but it was over lunchtime. Sit at a picnic table and talk with one of our Democratic legislators and work through some issues that, actually to do with this executive order. So I think we have some great support, and I truly believe that our legislator, our leaders in this county, recognize the importance of law enforcement. So I'm blessed. I hear some other sheriffs around the state that it's like, man, I feel bad for them, but we're fortunate.
You said legislators. Do you mean also, you're talking about all the people in the government, like legislators, as well as the county executive, right? Everybody.
Yeah, the county executive and our 19 county legislatures.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So.
And George.
And George, yeah. Well, that's the senator. Yeah.
Well, how are you feeling about the COVID issue of how do you think that's being handled?
So I think countywide, I think we're doing the best we can. I think we meet at least 3 times a week with the county executive, myself, public health director, 3 doctors, and the emergency services director, and are going through it. Our biggest concern is the recklessness. When we're trying to encourage people not to be reckless. I was sharing. I don't know that anybody really likes to wear the mask. It's an inconvenience. But if you want to know inconvenience, I grew up with 10 and sometimes 11 people in my household. 7 were ladies, and we had 1 bathroom. Okay, there were some inconveniences there, but we have to be willing to do that. And I think with any right we have responsibilities. And I have an 87-year-old mother-in-law living with me. I don't want to bring the virus home. I try not to be reckless with it, and that's just what we're going to encourage people to do. There are definitely some reckless acts that are happening out there, and that's where we start to see some spikes.
But you're not going to go close them down.
Now, you know what? What we do is we go try to talk, educate, and encourage people to follow the rules. But again, there are some things out there that I think is a constitutional right, and I'm not going to shut them down. What interestingly is the state hasn't been enforcing it. State police hasn't been enforcing the COVID orders. And if you hear the governor talk, he's always talking about local police, local government enforcing that. And I question why we're not having state enforcement of that.
2 questions. Have prisoners from here been released early? And also, if masks work, why are prisoners being let out early?
So,
Felons from state.
So yes, some inmates have been let out early. Clear up. I didn't let them out because I don't have the authority to let anybody out of jail. That comes from a court order, and so the Office of Court Administration basically told our local judges, set some guidelines. They reviewed and they looked. and I might be a little off on this, but they looked at people who had less than 6 months left on a sentence. We're releasing them, looking at the nonviolent offenders. I know there's been a few that came right back, but not as many as quite honestly, not as many as I thought were going to come back. One of the things I did worry about was just that is, we had no, and we still don't have any cases of COVID in our jail. And, don't want to jinx us on that, but it's the inmates were in there without COVID. We didn't want to, we're afraid if they got released, would they be practicing, precautionary measures, wearing the mask, and likely not. So, we do have some strict guidelines. People go into quarantine when they come back into the jail. We screen. Honestly, the first thing we did is started screening our employees because they're the ones that are out in the community. So, as far as the mask and that second question, I don't know, Mel. I do find it interesting. In February, in the beginning of March, if we saw somebody walking into a store with a mask on, we're going to stop and talk to them. Now it's the other way around. And even the first month or so that we were supposed to be wearing the mask, there's a section of the penal law that made it illegal to wear them. They did change that finally. But they're telling us we had to wear a mask, but the law, and this is again where they didn't necessarily look at all the consequences. So what do we do? Do we stop people? Do we not stop them? So there's that issue. Yes, sir.
Can you give us an update on the contact tracing phenomenon that's going on in New York and Chautauqua in particular?
I cannot. Only because I don't know a lot, and I'm not sure what phenomena you're talking about, but...
To elaborate, Cuomo has hired a group of people that are following up in contact tracing, and it seems to me a kind of police state activity.
Okay. Yeah, in Chautauqua County, our public health is doing the bulk of our contract tracing themselves within county. So, which I feel a little bit more comfortable with that, with our county public health. I believe, and I don't want to be maybe misspeaking, I think some of the quarantine issues that they're having is, our public health is trying to focus on people with the virus and helping them so we can prevent the spread versus looking at the people coming in and being quarantined from, I think we're up to 31 states now, and there could be more added because we know things change on a regular basis. But is there more than 31 now? Okay. Okay.
Puerto Rico.
So, really? Okay. Yeah, it's very difficult. We're Chautauqua County. You drive around at this time of year, how many different license plates do you see? And what worries me with that, again, with COVID, with the quarantine, is we have a lot of anonymous complaints being called in, and it makes it very difficult to even follow up on it, but it also takes up a lot of resources and a lot of time of police agencies trying to follow up. Many times they're supposed to be vetting the complaints through New York State PAWS, and some of the complaints we're getting, even what worded on the complaint, isn't a violation of the orders. So, my favorite one is we had one that there was a car with Alabama license plates parked at Dollar General, and the complaint was 6 days old. So now, if the car was still there 6 days later, I would think that's a good thing to look into. But likelihood of that being there was slim. But we have to follow up on them. So, yes.
Yes, assuming our schools reopen in the fall, will they still have security resource officers available?
In some schools. Okay, so right now, four schools that the sheriff's office had school resource officers haven't been able to continue because funding has been cut, so they've had to drop out. There's 3 other schools that we provide services for. We've had to look at the costs involved, and we're not sure what's going to happen with those. I can't speak. Jamestown has school resource officers. Westfield, Fredonia, and Dunkirk. I don't know what their status is, but if people can afford it, and the school districts can afford it, the agencies can afford it, they would still be doing those.
So are the social workers and counselors going to take over domestic violence and and mental health calls as they want?
Probably not. We are working with Office of Mental Hygiene. One of the things that I've worked for since about 2006, 2007 is working on crisis intervention in responding to calls with people with emotional distress. And we are trying to work with the mental hygiene is to find out what is the best plan nationwide. And you know, I'm not here yet, but some of the experts, and not only the mental health, but in law enforcement, have seen a benefit to having some sort of mobile crisis responding. But we have to make sure I worry about safety. And
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's,
that was a little bit just.
yeah, that's my fear is safety issues. But again, we're meeting. We're scheduled to meet tomorrow, but I got postponed to next week.
Yeah.
Well, you know, everybody. I'd say the majority of our calls are somebody with emotional distress. People don't call us because they want to just say hello. You know, they're calling because something is going on. So, you know, and it's maybe a situational stressor, but they're having a stressful event, and so we have to be better at dealing with that, and that's what, again, something we've been really working hard at teaching our recruits as well as in-service training. Okay. All right.
Jim, thanks so much.
Thank you.
It's been very informative and appreciate the work you do.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
But before you leave,